A very good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening, Meeta ma'am. Good evening, Vineet ji. Good evening, all the parents, families of MIS. Glad to have everyone here. Uh, Today we have Mr. Vineet Gupta, uh, Chairman, Jamboree Education, also a very eminent educationist. And Vineet ji, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
He founded uh, a I think, India's most prestigious liberal arts university, the Ashoka University. He's been founder and trustee of Raksha. Welcome on board, sir. So Meeta ma'am, and we've been having this discussion, and we've been talking about how does Mussoorie International go about preparing our girls uh, for them to be future ready. And so we thought, you'll be the best person to kind of help us and advise our girls. You've been, preparing students over the years with their careers and journey abroad and founding these amazing universities. So what does it take? Over to Meeta, ma'am.
Thank you, Amisha. Thank you. And welcome, Vineet. It's a pleasure to interact with you once again. We did have a little talk in the morning.
Yeah, thank you
Um,
so
so,
much.
I would straight away go on to, you know, leading this conversation by asking you a couple of questions. And these questions would probably navigate us through the desired channel, which would probably help the girls or prepare them to be future ready, or would give them an inkling and or an idea as how would they be future ready. So, Vineet, would you please enlighten me? What do you think? It's not like a question answer session. Yes, I would also chip in from time to time. But what do you think are the core competencies and skills that any child, whether she's from MIS or from any other school, requires or are desirable for a child to be ready to step into the university scenario of higher education?
Right. No, thank you, Mita, and for inviting me. And wonderful to interact with some students and parents. Uh, well, I think the question you asked is a difficult one, and as an educationist, I'm sure you've grappled with this. Uh, and I do believe that competencies and skills, uh, some have fundamentally not changed over time
Mm.
and will not change, but some perhaps will, with the advent of technology, the way the world is changing, the problems that the world is dealing with. But I think for this conversation, I may want to just present a couple of slides. Um, so I'll just share my screen and let me know if you all can see. So I think the first sort of conversation I wanted to have is, if you see the universe of a child, or for example, any individual, I think success and whatever we are learning, whether through school or through college, is essentially getting bucketed into three domains: knowledge, skills, and attitude. Uh, Knowledge is pretty much the entire sphere of disciplinary subject knowledge that we gain, whether in physics or chemistry or literature or history or geography. I think a lot of our school education, a lot of the 20th century education has been around knowledge. Knowledge, of course, is a key determinant to success. Uh, on top of that, then you have skills. And there is a lot of conversation around what are the key skills for success in the 21st century. And we often speak about communication, and I'm talking of communication as a little bit distinct from reading and writing. Our reading and writing, in some sense, our school curriculum is really fundamentally imparting reading and writing, which are key skills for success in any profession. Anybody who can read well, write well, it's sort of half the battle won in your professional career. But on the skill side, I'm using the term communication, which sometimes becomes distinctive. I mean, how are you able to communicate your thoughts and ideas in a manner, that you are authentic, you seem genuine, you are able to not only communicate your ideas efficiently, but also win over people. Your ability to think critically. How do you connect the dots? You may have learned something in one subject, but can you apply that to another one? Or the pieces of information that you are picking up, whether in school or through your extracurricular activities or your participation in any other engagement that you've been part of. Can you connect the dots between everything that you've learned? So critical thinking, problem solving, your ability to collaborate, your ability to empathize, I think all of these have become extremely important. And for the longest time, skills were not part of any formal curriculum, and one thought that skills get developed as part of, whether through debating or, but skill building is now formally becoming part of college curriculum. At least we see that shift in the last 20, 25 years. And the third thing, which I feel is again a key determinant to success, is attitude. And this last line that I put here, more often than not, your attitude determines your altitude in life. And attitude is so important for success in life. Grit, determination, your emotional quotient. I mean, there are various terms that can be used for it. How do you develop the right attitude? I think there's a lot of debate going on in academia now. Starting from Stanford, UPenn, there is literature, books, research coming out. And there is a body of literature now saying, look, there are ways in which formal education can, in some sense, develop the right attitude traits. And attitude, I think in schools, and I was going through your website before joining the webinar, and I also heard some of your students speak on this, and I heard some of the alums speak. And what really stood out to me for everyone who was speaking was the confidence, I think the clarity. So in some sense, boarding schools like yours are already doing that, right? And I should ask you, how do you do it? Perhaps you do it by sports. Perhaps you do it by this, way of people living together, sharing joys and sorrows together. There's this tremendous element of teamwork. You are perhaps inculcating attitude by telling students or teaching them acceptance and tolerance, right? I mean, everything is not going to come their way. There are times when you have to step back, so attitude is, and I do believe boarding schools like MIS have, and when we interview students at Ashoka and we are checking students coming from all over, I think, and whether it's MIS or Doon School or, some of these schools, that quality of you, and people are using now different terms to define that. Some could call it leadership, some could call it the right attitude, some could call it emotional quotient. But those personality traits that you are identifying in students are key determinants to success. So, without sort of taking more time on this question, I think I tend to divide this competencies in these three areas. All three are equally important. The world can argue this, for some people, one stands over the other. If you want to be a scholar, if you want to do a PhD, become a scholar, clearly, the domain of knowledge is what will help you the most. If you want to be a business leader, perhaps skills and attitude may count for more. That doesn't mean knowledge will not help. The people in the domain of sports and who excel in sports, it's often say it's all about skill and attitude. But I think the interplay of all these three is not lost. And if I would only encourage parents and children that as you navigate your education journey, please do focus on all three. Sometimes we perhaps don't end up focusing equally on all. Mita, I'll stop here, and I can keep going on and on, but I maybe,
Thank you, Vineet. I would just like to add one thing to these three, which are, very, very fundamental, is the application.
right.
So I think the fourth bit could be, before attitude, we could have the application. So it could be knowledge, skills, and then with the skills you apply. So when you spoke about connecting the dots, that was basically application.
Right.
So yes, that could be formally added to it. MIS is a school whereby we nurture our girls to dream, and we ensure that their dreams actually meet with direction. And direction is given in various ways. Now, when you talked about the skills, I totally agree with all the points that you put forward. And the skills that MIS tries to inculcate as a boarding school are the transferable skills. Not the skills which are just stationary, but they are interdisciplinary and they are transferable. And as a result, our girls tend to be very, very successful, along with the integrity and the fearlessness which is inculcated in them into any arena, whether it's within the country or it's abroad. So yes, we teach them to be fearless. We teach them to take risks, and we tell them that if you do not take risks and you sit with your dreams, you won't be reaching anywhere. So that's a very, very important part of the education. Personally, I believe most of the education, if I have to really, really put it into percentages, then I would put it into a percentage like 80% of the education within school is only gearing towards confidence. Now, and it happens outside the classroom. So it's very rightly put by you that the opportunities that any boarding school like ours presents, whether it's on a field or whether it's in terms of collaboration for project-based learning, or in terms of team building, in terms of debating, in terms of expressing their mindset, in terms of adapting, in terms of accepting and tolerating, and valuing other people.
Right.
And also understanding that they are privileged enough to have this kind of an education in comparison to the not so privileged one. This is what sets the girls apart and actually prepares them for life, whereby we also instill a certain amount of humbleness and modesty, you know, and teach them never to cross the very subtle boundaries which are there between with respect for elders, So these are probably some of the attitudes and the skills that make these girls so very, very successful in any arena, whichever they choose to be. They are actually not leaders in the making, but they are leaders themselves, waiting to be discovered at places like Ashoka.
Yeah.
So going on further, Vineet, I would like to know from you, how should a girl, proceed with making informed choices? How should she go about knowing what is best? Because it is seen. I have seen some of my own, contemporaries, as well as I have seen children, my own children, their friends, whereby they study a particular discipline, and once a discipline is done, they have nothing to do with that discipline in their life. For instance, a girl goes in to do microbiology or chemical and biomolecular sciences, and well, she ends up being a banker.
Right.
So how do you end up making an informed choice, and you stick on to the choice? How do you know what you are choosing is right? The mindset keeps changing. There is so much of variability, so much of fluctuation happening. But how does one go about that?
Yeah. So again, this is again $1 million question, if I may say. I'm an engineer, by the way. I'm an engineer by undergraduate training, and I sometimes feel guilty that I did not practice too much engineering in my life. I became an educationist after that. But but the fact of the matter is that training is not lost on me, right? I think the analytical rigor, the we I was in the hostel in IIT Delhi. The sort of the bondings we cultivated there, the group of people who came together. We were competitive. We were fiercely competitive with each other, but it was also very collaborative. I think those qualities have, as you said, that these are non-transferable, and wherever you go later on, those sort of traits have stayed with you. But coming back to your question, and let me again I'll put another slide. Um, just give me another second. So let me, the importance of attitude I've sort of spoken about, but let me talk about 4 other things, and that may help to students to sort of make up their mind on what they want to study. I think one is blended learning is on the rise. The world knows that. And why do I put this up? The reason I put this up is right now, there is a lot of learning going on in the classroom. There's a lot of good learning which will happen when students or girls go to college. But there is a parallel universe of learning going on every day, right? Right in the morning when you open your WhatsApp, you start getting videos, and you start getting, by the time you get to the newspaper, you have a 20-minute sense on what's going on in the world, because some alerts have started coming, and if you log into newspaper, so there is that information. The digital information flow has somehow started, right? Even without you've not attended a formal lecture, but the digital flow of information has started. Then there is the opportunity to do courses online. And so by the time you go to sleep, for every student, there is a formal world of education, and there is a digital world that is parallelly sort of teaching you subconscious. It is happening all the time. It's happening with us. It's happening far more with students. Uh, Navigating this world is extremely important now. I think students, girls, should develop the ability to pick out the right content from the internet. There is a whole world of learning out there. I mean, there are outstanding platforms like Coursera, edX. It doesn't matter which discipline you want to study, you can pretty much go to the web and pick up anything. In fact, when students start meeting me in grades 8, 9, 10, I would encourage, and I'm sure this is already happening at Mussoorie International, but encourage students to become a part of these platforms. There are outstanding platforms, because skills are changing so fast that even when girls graduate, by the time they are 17, 18, they graduate from school. They graduate from college when they are 22. Maybe they pick up their first job. By 27, 28, they may realize they have to pick up another skill, or they have to pick up another subject. So being competent with blended learning, or getting comfort with blended learning, I think is one sort of advice I will have for students. The third one, which I mentioned here, is digital literacy. I think digital literacy is extremely important. Again, and this doesn't mean that you have to program, that you have to know computer science. If you do, that's good. But even if you don't, your comfort with digital mediums, right? If you want to become a journalist, how do you express yourself on the internet, right? Can you process the multiple sources of information coming from Twitter, coming from other channels, and sort of articulate your message in a manner that it's read, it's responded, it's recognized? And I should say that students of the current generation are far more digitally literate than any of us are. You pick up any company today, you pick up any organization, the digital marketing team of any organization is full of youngsters. I think in some sense, if you're over 30, 35, the people believe that you don't have the sense to convey messages in the right manner. But here also, I think students should be a little cautious that this comes with a lot of responsibility. There is the dark side of the digital world too, right? Where are the invasion of privacy? There are issues around a lot of fake news, fake content going around. So students developing an early ability to really figure out what is right, what is wrong. I think in today's day and age, this is extremely important. And no matter how much we encourage or discourage as schools and colleges, this is going on, right? I almost feel that schools and colleges should start now doing courses around digital content. What's fake? How do you identify what's fake, what's true? How do you make judgments on what is right and wrong? What do you put on social media and what you don't? Every child is putting something out there on the social media, right? How can we sensitize and guide them what to put there, what not to, right? How do you protect your privacy? So how do you communicate better on digital mediums? How do you get comfort with digital mediums? The fourth I would think is, and this is important from the question that you were asking, Meeta, on career choices. I fundamentally believe, irrespective of whatever discipline you choose to study, whether you want to study bio or physics or math or economics, the fact of the matter is that most students will have multiple interests. I have seen very few students in the last 15 years now in higher education, that students rarely come and say, look, this is the only subject that I'm passionate about. And varying choices. You will have students who like physics and like history, philosophy and math. And Ashoka, we find that, literature and economics, So students have multiple interests. they should discover their interests. I personally believe it's not that one discipline is more important than the other. All disciplines are good. So you should study what you love to study, but do develop the ability to read and write well as you are doing these disciplines, to be able to think critically, right? Be analytical, right? So sometimes you become analytical if you are good at math. People with math ability, data ability become very analytical. Uh, what is an outstanding skill is if you can read well, write well, and also be very analytical, which means you are good at English, writing, communication, and math. You can pretty much then any profession and you will do well. I can really guarantee you, right? But there are some students who say, look, I'm good at reading and writing, but I don't like math. Or there are some others who would say, look, I love math, but I don't like to read and write. So can you develop one of the two competencies? And I'm really bucketing reading, writing, communication in one bucket and math in another. Sometimes students will excel in both. Sometimes they will excel in one over the other. So irrespective of whatever discipline you like, can you develop competency in these two critical areas, reading, writing, and math, or reading, writing, or math, right? And if you are good at one of these two, if you are good at both, that's outstanding. But even if you are good at one of these two, you will likely have a great career. Of course, then think critically, be creative. One of the challenges with technology is that the value for creativity has actually gone up, right? I mean, if you look at what careers will survive after 10 years, machines will pretty much when I was in school, one of the biggest things was how if you can calculate fast, our teachers used to give numbers and problems, and if you could really multiply fast, calculate fast, you were considered very smart. Now that no longer happens. People have stopped bothering to do that. Now, if you could remember more, you were considered smart, right? Now, pretty much you Google anything, you get an answer in 2 minutes. Calculator processing, computing has become so fast. So calculation ability is no longer a great skill, right? So creativity, actually, the value of creativity actually has gone up. What can humans do that machines can't do? I think creativity is one domain where, AI is coming in and perhaps machines will get creative. But I do believe the premium on creativity is gone up, right? So people who are creative, who can connect the dots. So my basic advice, Mita, here being, don't be too wedded to a discipline, right? It doesn't matter whether you like history, biology, physics, but do develop one of the two ability, either great communication, reading, writing, or math, or both, right? These two, in some sense, are fundamental to any discipline. How do you read and write, and how do you think? Can you be analytical? And then disciplines don't matter. Explore multiple disciplines. That is the essence of a broad-based liberal arts education, which I'll talk about.
Yeah.
And last, which you spoke of, interdisciplinary education. The fact that you can do multiple subjects. Problems today have become interdisciplinary, whether it's of climate change, whether of agriculture, whether of poverty. Engineering is no longer uniform too. If you're building a bridge, it's as much about the civil engineering, and it's equally about where is the bridge, how many people will get will get dislocated, where will you settle them, where will you relocate them, right? What are the challenges on the environment? So I think every discipline, every problem has become interdisciplinary, and for students to really have that ability early on is important. So I would sort of leave students with some broad thoughts. I believe students should pretty much follow their passion. There's not really one more important than the other.
Yeah, I think that was very insightful, Vineet. And believe me, at MIS, we are really, really preparing our girls as per, those 5 emerging themes of yours. Now, to move ahead, it is said that it's not what you achieve, but what you overcome that defines your career. So at any boarding school, for that matter, boarding schools are supposed to be very, very protective realms and protective spheres, whereby the outside world is kind of slightly cut off for a girl. So when she is within, she is so protected, and she's so so sure of herself. The competition is only limited to within these walls, or maybe academic competition, maybe some co-curricular competition. But then that is also with fixed number of schools of your
Right.
own level.
Similar.
Yeah, similar schools or similar missions and similar purpose. But what happens is that somewhere when a girl moves out of school, she is just 17 plus or 18 years old, and she moves. Give me a minute. We have a little power cut, so I'll just get the generator on.
Yeah, but we
The
can hear you
power-
well. So if you
yeah.
want to continue speaking, that's fine too.
Yeah. So what happens is that she is emotionally protected. She is physically protected. She hasn't ventured out into the big bad world as yet, and there are certain challenges that she will face. With her contemporaries from all walks of life, from all social and economic strata of life, which would also probably be intelligent enough to get admission into your institution. So, how do you help children when they come into your institution in terms of their emotional, well-being, and how do you deal with the situation when there are children who are now into a sphere of unlimited freedom?
Right.
Schools are very, very disciplinary, very, very organized. They are minors in school, but when they move out into a university, they're all majors. There are a lot of things that they can do now, which they could not do before. So, how do you deal with this sudden burst of a bubble into a freedom bubble or a free atmosphere?
Well, I think that's again a very pertinent question. And now I should also tell you, Mita, that universities like Ashoka are very inclusive.
Mhm.
So while you spoke of challenges of girls coming from schools like MIS, which are boarding schools, very protected, very high quality of education, but equally we are getting students who have, some of them are first time learners or first time college goers in their families, right? So there is that dimension. School students are coming from the remotest towns of the country, um, from Sikkim, from Assam, from some other areas. They are perhaps the first children to go to college in their families. Some are coming from extremely disadvantaged background, right?
Yeah.
So we get a cohort which is sort of diverse, where there are students coming from city schools, day boarding city schools, where they sort of get up, go to school, come back home. Then there are schools like yours, boarding schools, high quality education, development of emotional quotient. And then there are these schools coming from all over the country, tier 2, tier 3 cities, small towns, villages. uh, we also are very inclusive on language. So sometimes if students even can't, but they are extremely bright, but they may not be able to communicate well in English. So we have bridge program. So there is that, there's this whole diversity coming together.
Mhm.
Now, what I should tell you first, what should make the girls happy is that students coming from boarding schools actually adjust the best,
Mhm.
because we are a fully residential, and my conversation is happening most in the context of Ashoka.
Yeah.
Because we are fully residential, so everybody has to be on campus. uh, so students who have actually are coming from boarding schools actually adjust the best, because they are used to living outside. They have already understood the boundaries of living with one another. Maybe it was more constrained and there was less freedom, but they've understood what it takes to share. They've understood what it means to give and take. uh, so the boarding school students actually do the best. Now, what is a challenge is what you spoke of, which is that suddenly you get more freedom. And how do you deal with the freedom? Uh, that's a tough one. I mean, I should say that's a tough one. We run a office of learning support. We run Ashoka runs the most elaborate counseling program in the country, if I may say. We have 5 full-time counselors on campus. Uh, and students, if they are having struggles of either they are feeling they don't belong, or they are feeling some sort of peer pressure, or even if they are feeling that they are being harassed in some way, right?
Mhm.
or they are dealing with issues. Students sometimes often are dealing with issues which may have to do with what happened in their families or what happened with their friends. So psychological counseling is a big support that we provide at Ashoka. We have a very strong RA program, the residential. We students act as RAs, so there is one RA for every 30 students. So RA almost becomes like a friend to students on his or her floor. For girls, you should be happy to note we have 57% women on Ashoka campus and 43% men.
Oh,
So, we are almost biased in the other way in some sense. uh,
I'm happy to hear.
it's a very safe place for girls in that manner, of course, with more freedom, but lots of support of learning, lots of support for psychological counseling, a strong RA program, and then we have buddy systems. They buddy up with seniors
Yeah,
and they help navigate.
yeah, yeah.
And we would encourage you to come and visit the campus, and you will see these. When the time they come in to the time they graduate, I mean, they have totally transformed.
So thank you very much for that invitation, and I'm surely going to take you up on that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So now, moving on, they say, like you also said so some while back, that do what you love and love what you do. And Ashoka University, to my understanding, offers liberal education. Now, would you please enlighten, the people who are here with us, that what exactly liberal education means, and how does a child, who has always had a timetable and who's had set periods, and she moves from one room to the other and set teachers, how does she go about choosing subjects that she has to do, and get into this liberal way of education which she is not so very used to, but yet she wants to follow her dreams. She has the courage to follow her dreams and her heart, and she wants to go ahead. But how do you kind of pitch this liberal education to a child who is very unknown to this liberal education world?
So and it's a great question, and I'll answer. And let me first answer, and let's see if some of the things that you get asked get. So, the idea of a broad-based liberal arts education and liberal education is actually 2,000 years old, right? And it started in Greece. Uh, the word liberal education, I mean, the liberal comes from the word liber, which in Latin means free.
Mhm.
And liberalist actually means befitting a free person. Actually, it meant befitting a free man, but the genders have sort of become neutral now. So befitting a free person. So
Okay.
liberal education in that sense means what sort of education should a free person have? And when I'm saying free, free as in someone who's not a slave, right? So we know that in those times you had lots of slaves and they were free people who were part of society. So it's almost saying like, look, a citizen of India or a citizen of the world, what sort of education should that is how broad liberal education is. Uh, and let me go deeper. So at that point, the Greeks thought that, you teach people astronomy, you teach them logic, you teach them some math, you teach them philosophy, you teach them politics, you teach them something about society, and that is the right education for a free person. Somebody who can elect their government, somebody who can be part of society, who can engage in civil debate. So that was the idea of. Now, if we ask this question, that what's the right education for a citizen of the 21st century? It's a very broad question, and the idea of the liberal education evolved. And the Oxford Cambridge first sort of progressed with it, and then the American universities like Harvard, Yale, Chicago, they deepened it. And very soon it started to become, look, a great education means you need to know humanities, you need to know social sciences, and you need to know sciences, right? So it became an interdisciplinary mix of these, and then you can specialize in whatever you want to do, right? Now, today, the world is also saying, look, this has to change. I mean, this whole idea of data and digital technologies is as important. So should this become, that's what the world is grappling with. And when I visit some of the top liberal colleges around the world, including Wellesley, which is the top college for women, and Hillary Clinton came from there, and some of the top women leaders have been part of Wellesley. Uh, And the Wellesley president in the last conversation was telling me, look, the sciences and tech has to become a key part of liberal arts education, because that's what the world is seeing. So I think that's how broad the idea is. Now, let me how universities have. So firstly, liberal doesn't mean that you are free to do whatever you want. It doesn't mean that you won't have timetables. It doesn't mean you will not have schedules. In fact, Ashoka, in some sense, can be pretty prescriptive about our syllabus. So it doesn't mean too much choice, right? It does mean free thought, free thinking, the freedom to choose what you want to specialize in. But it really doesn't mean that there's too much freedom in what you are doing every day, right? And I'll just share my screen quickly, just to help students in understanding. So broadly, if I can sort of summarize, first, it means freedom to choose what you want to study. And when I'm saying what you want to study, uh, whether you want to do a bachelor's in economics, or you want to do in math, or you want to do in history, we are flexible. You can come in to Ashoka saying, look, I don't know. You get into Delhi University, you have to declare that you want to do BA economics. Ashoka, you really come in undeclared. And in your first year, you explore. So you study the natural sciences, social sciences, and humanities. So you end up doing courses in all of these disciplines. And I'll just quickly put up a list of those courses. And then by second year, by the beginning of second year, mid in second year, you start to decide, whether you want to. So half the curriculum is actually very broad. The 25, 30 courses you do while at Ashoka, half of them are interdisciplinary across disciplines, and the other half are in your area that you've picked, whether economics, math, history, sociology, literature, whatever. So those are the first two principles of a liberal education. The third is extremely interdisciplinary. Interdisciplinary, not that you can study many disciplines, but also disciplines are crafted in an interdisciplinary manner. You will have a philosophy and a math faculty teaching together. You may have a political science and data faculty teaching together. So it's T-shaped. That's the last point that mentions on my slide. Liberal arts education is T-shaped. So it allows for breadth, and then it allows for depth. And let me put up the next slide. So if you see, Ashoka can be prescriptive, as I said. So when you come in, every student has to study these. You don't have a choice, right? So these 5 and 9 courses that you see here, every student has to do these 9 courses, and pretty much in the first 2-3 semesters. So you do a course in quantitative thinking. You do a course in principles of science. You do a course on Indian civilizations, which is really an Indian culture history course. You do a course in mind and behavior, which is really a philosophy course. We do a book on great books, and our faculty teach different books. You could be learning the Mahabharata in one course, or you could be learning some other great text. Then you do a course in economics and society, so it's really the fundamentals of economics, environmental studies, and you do a course on literature in the world and introduction to critical thinking. So if you see, you've pretty much spanned the domain of quantitative thinking, science, economics, history, literature, philosophy. So the interdisciplinary breadth has come right in the beginning. And if you ask any Ashoka student, they will tell you that these were the best courses they did, right? These are taught by some of our best faculty. And after that, towards second year, students start to really decide whether they want to do literature, or students sometimes come in thinking they may want to do economics, and they pivot and they say, no, I think I want to do history. And what is also important, and this should particularly be of importance to the girls, when placements happen at the end of third, fourth year, I should tell you the top companies, including a McKinsey and a Citibank, are not very particular that you studied math or economics. We have our history majors getting into McKinsey, or we have our philosophy majors getting into Citibank, right? As long as you have the skills that I spoke of, if you read and write well, you can think critically, you can connect the dots, you can solve problems. Most corporates don't care. If you have to be a dentist, then of course you have to study medicine. You can't study philosophy and operate people. So that doesn't happen. If you want to build a bridge, you have to be a civil engineer. That doesn't happen. But for 60% of the jobs in the world, the employers actually don't care what major you have. So you can be a citizen of the world. The Facebook CEO, she is a philosophy major. So you can come from pretty much any discipline today. Satya Nadella, who's heading the large, Microsoft, he's a mechanical engineer. He's not from computer science.
Yeah.
So, as long as you have the rigor of disciplines, you have the interdisciplinary breadth, and you have the right skills of thinking, problem solving, writing, analytical ability, and that's what Ashoka develops. So over the 3 years, each of our students will be able to read and write. They will be outstanding communicators, critical thinkers, and then they will go in the world, and those skills will be transferable. They will move jobs, they will move professions, but hopefully continue to do well. So I hope I've answered your question, Mita.
You definitely have answered my question, and you have left me with a wish that, me at my age, I'm on the other side of 50 now. I wish I could come to Ashoka University. I could study there. And, I must congratulate you on what you are doing at Ashoka University, because the national education policy is yet to come into practice and probably will come into its form in 2023. But you are already doing what it is doing. For
Absolutely.
instance, if I actually talk about the national education policy, when it comes into its implementation stage, right from grade 9 to grade 12, so 9, 10, 11, and 12, 4 years, there would be around 8 semesters, and there would be ample choice for the students who are into those years of education to keep changing their subjects. And there would be probably an emphasis of picking various subjects. So you could end up doing physics with philosophy, history, and they would be, like each semester. So around, like, you have 4 years, there would be around 8 semesters, and each semester you could just pick and choose any subject that you would like to study. So which is actually what I understand Ashoka University is doing. Believe me, when I passed out of my grade 12, I studied biology and math, and it was very, very bucketed in those years. I knew nothing about commerce. I knew nothing of the budgetary terms.
Right.
And when I actually first sat down to, see in the parliament what is being presented as a budget, half the terminology went beyond my comprehension and understanding. And I'm sure with schools like ours and universities like yours, we can easily tide over such situation and produce more rounded personalities and more rounded and adaptable understanding. Now, we're moving towards the end of the conversation. There is something that comes to my mind, which I would like to ask you, Vineet. They say the true purpose of education is actually to make your mind and not make a career.
Right.
So how do we go about making minds? You make careers, right? We try to push people. We try to bridge the gap in terms of skills. You try to bridge the gap in terms of skills so that the employers find the employees good enough to be employed. But that's all about professions and careers. How do you go about, kind of making minds, which is so
Right.
very, very important?
No,
How do
and
you go about, sowing in the seed that when it is the right time, when it's the right age and stage, that they must give back to the society? How do you go about creating those beautiful minds which travel distances, meet people who can, spread the cheer with simple words that are put on paper, or a simple video, or, umpteen number of ways how you could go about? So tell me, Vineet, the most difficult question that I can't answer myself, I pose it to you today. How do you make minds?
so, I think, Mita, though I didn't mention it in my talk, but that is exactly what we are doing. We say an education at Ashoka is an education for life, and not an education for a career, right? That's the simple message we give. I mean, it does happen that our students end up doing very well in their careers too, because our fundamental belief is that you have to prepare students for life. Universities are places where knowledge gets created, where students open up their minds. And it is really a place some of the fundamental principles we operate with. Ashoka helps develop the love for learning. You ask any Ashoka child, what do they love most about Ashoka? And they will tell you, we love the classroom, right? Now, I've not seen many places in India or elsewhere where people say that, right? They want to be with faculty, they want to learn. You will find students are doing their own courses, but they also go and sit in some other classes just to hear.
Mm-hmm.
When I go to Ashoka, which is maybe 2-3 times a month now, because it's a little bit of a drive, I go and sit in our faculty classes. We have some outstanding people teaching. We have Professor Rudrangshu Mukherjee, Pratap Mehta, Gopal Gandhi. I mean, these are outstanding historians. If you want to learn about India, if you want to learn about our history, about our culture, I have never loved history ever. I was an engineer, but having sat in some of these classes at Ashoka, it's developed that, right? So developing the love for learning, and education for life. Uh, the third thing I wanted to say is that, and it is embedded firmly in the Ashoka, and Ashoka education wants to inculcate a generation of people who are committed to public service. How do you go beyond yourself to contribute to the community around you? I think that is big for Ashoka. And as you pick up snippets of what our alum are doing, you will find some of the most fearless journalists. I got a newspaper report in the morning where one of our alum has written about a very controversial topic very, very fearlessly. Some of
Was she Miss?
Sorry?
So she from MIS, because we produce girls who are fearless.
Like that. Yeah, I should check that. So, fearless, go out in the world, do the right thing. And you will automatically, if you have an education for life, you will automatically make a great career. I think, so the second one is really stemming from the first, which you spoke of.
Mm-hmm.
And that is pretty much a part of the mission. Our students are likely to pivot careers 2-3 times, or maybe be even. But yes, I mean, commitment to public service, doing good to humanity, doing good around you is a big part of the Ashoka mission. The 12 villages around Ashoka have almost been adopted by Ashoka. A lot of our students work in that community. And Ashoka is a humbling experience for people because our students, as I said, I mean, 25% are coming on full scholarship from extremely underprivileged backgrounds. Another 30% are coming from, 50%, 70%. And experience is humbling also for students coming from privilege to see, that their roommate, maybe, is finding difficulty even to afford soap and toothpaste, and then some other students have privilege. So to grow up in that environment is also a great learning.
Yeah, no, these are experiences of life, definitely, and amazing experiences of life. My last question to you, Vineet, in fact, it's not really a question, is that you run courses at Ashoka University where part of the course is in India and a part of the course is abroad in some other university. Now, a lot of brain drain has happened, is still happening, and the percentage, okay, if I keep aside the COVID year, but the percentage of people who would want an education abroad is constantly on the surge, is only rising. And with a university whereby there is a possibility of doing half of the degree abroad, how do you ensure that these people who go abroad, they actually come back and they deliver to the country, they help out the country, and not just stay abroad and better other countries with
Yeah.
their expertise, with their values, with their skills, which were probably, put into them, inculcated into them, they imbibed from their schools in India and probably some universities in India like yours.
So, the students have a choice if they want to do a semester abroad, right? Or they want to do an year abroad, but it's not mandatory. So almost 70% students end up doing at least one summer abroad, right? That's true for a lot of, so all our students, or 70% of them, have international exposure by the time they graduate.
Okay.
However, a very small percentage, maybe 5-10%, end up spending a semester or a year abroad, right? That percentage is not that large. But yes, most of them go for a summer. Now, having said that, I've been a firm believer that uh, internet, some form of international education actually does a lot of good, right? Uh, and it is difficult to control destinies of students and where they will be, right? But I think if they are good citizens of the world, some good will come to India too.
Surely.
They will go to the top universities abroad. I mean, look at some of the Indians who are. Abhijit Banerjee got a Nobel Prize in economics last year. So these people will do good to the world. They will come back. They will do good to India. Half the faculty at Ashoka have come back. They had PhDs abroad and they were teaching abroad. They've now come back and they are teaching with us. And they bring in that international character, the rigor of learning. The PhD degrees abroad are extremely rigorous, and they are bringing in that sort of culture here back.
Yeah.
A lot of our engineers who went abroad are leading companies, and so I think some good. It is difficult to control. It is a free world. People will do what they will do. But I think if you make them good citizens of the world, and if they get great exposures, some good will happen and come back. But at least now 70%, 75% of our students are choosing to be in India. So we are happy about that.
No, it's very well said, because sooner or later there will be no boundaries. So it's we are one humanity, and so you've rightly said, wherever they are, they just do good and well for the communities over there. We should be happy with all of that. Vineet, let's open up this session to the audience for questions. So, dear people who are logged in, if you have any questions, you could type them into the chat box, and Vineet and I would probably take them up together. So the chat box is there. I've opened up my chat box. Vineet, you could open up your chat box also, in case there are any questions that you would like to kind of be answered by our expert over here. Vineet, we'll be happy to answer them. So go ahead and type your questions into the chat box. I don't see anything happening. Yeah. Anybody? Amisha, is there any question from anybody? Amisha, are you there?
Yes, my signals are pretty bad, but yes, what we can do is possibly request Vineet ji to possibly share his email ID. So just in case students have questions and they want to directly reach out, that would be super.
Yeah, I'll just put that up.
Yeah.
I know for sure we have Ekta here, who's been very concerned about her daughter's education, and she has been wanting to reach out. So yes, that would be helpful. Thank you so much.
And if anybody else has any, anything to any parent, or you feel free to write in, and everybody is welcome to visit the Ashoka campus. We run some great programs, tours actually. Every Friday is a tour.
Mm-hmm.
You can register. I mean, these are COVID times, so travel is a little restricted, but we welcome every student and parent with open arms. I've also been thinking lately of developing programs for school teachers. So maybe we will do that in the summer or.
Definitely. We look forward to such programs. And Vineet, there is an open invitation for you to come to Mussoorie International School.
Yeah, I would love. Next time I'm coming to Mussoorie, I'll write to you and.
Yes, please do. I look forward to welcoming you onto the campus, and you would be a great inspiration to my girls. And I wish a lot of girls from MIS actually join Ashoka University and, benefit by all that, the great work that you do over there. So thank you, Vineet. It was great interacting with you. Thank you for sparing your precious time and being here with us. Thank you, Amisha. And thank you all the audience, the lovely people who have logged in. I hope you've all had a fruitful session and you've all benefited by what you've heard. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for being, and have a great evening ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.